Hello friends, wonderful greetings of the day to all of you. I welcome you to today's session wherein we would try to discuss how our country, India, is actually strategizing its overall policy framework, be it economic policies, financial policies, or the major trade relationships with our member countries across the globe. We need to keep in mind that these times are quite turbulent if we talk about the global scenario. From last 2 years, the COVID pandemic has been going on, which has disturbed major economies of the world. Secondly, the supply chain disruptions which have been caused by the Ukraine-Russia war, which is going on from February 2022. Major economies have seen very tough times, right? And they are struggling for their survival because of huge fluctuations in the economic parameters. We have seen various examples in front of us, as in previous session I had explained about the various aspects of the Sri Lankan economy, that is where they actually lacked, which led to their collapse, and how did they basically manage to reach to a level wherein they can survive in these times. So the basic agenda of the strategic formulation and implementation should be very visionary and far-sighted. This should be the basic theme of the formulation of strategies, of long-term strategies. So in order to attain the economic balance, in order to attain the economic balance between various parameters, we need to give priority that what is the major area of concern as of now which will affect the survival of a country. Keeping in mind, we are a developing country, we are a developing economy whose main pillars of survival are food, fuel, and fertilizer. And mind you, these three sectors are the main sectors which have got affected adversely across the globe since the commencement of the Ukraine-Russia war because of the disturbances in the supply chains. All of us now, if we discuss these three aspects one by one, first of all comes the fuel. Now fuel is of two types, that is fossil fuels and non-fossil fuels. In case of fossil fuels, we know that Russia is the main exporter of the crude oil across the globe for the major economies across the globe. Now, since this war has begun, it has led to various disturbances in the supply of crude oil to various countries. Even in India, in our own country, we have seen various price fluctuations in fuels. There have been a lot of price hikes in this fuel price because its supply got hampered. Secondly, we are also exploring the non-fossil fuel energy aspect, that is the renewable energy aspect, because of the climate issue. We have formed sustainable development goals. The United Nations has put forward 17 sustainable development goals, that is SDGs, to go green. That is the Go Green initiative is being carried out, and it is and the target has been set by the United Nations that by 2050 we need to achieve that Go Green initiative at the best possible level, wherein developing countries have the major role to play, keeping in mind that the developing countries contribute to nearly 66.67% of the greenhouse gas emissions. This is very important. They contribute nearly 66.67% of that is 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions is from the developing countries. So we have to work very hard in this aspect. And India is being praised by many economies across the globe how it had managed that pandemic crisis, and how it is managing this current crisis of the Ukraine-Russia war, how it is managing its own survival, and also being able to lend a helping hand to its neighboring countries. For instance, in Sri Lanka, which faced a major economic turmoil because of their policy framework, it was not so far-sighted or visionary approach in their overall strategies, which led to its collapse. And then they gradually managed to stand itself. India lent a helping hand to Sri Lanka as the humanitarian approach. Why India has been able to, why India, being a developing country, still was able to cope up with these uncertainties in a very desirable way. That is not only helping its own citizens, but helping various countries across the globe. From last 3 years, we have been seeing how we have been performing, and we are being praised for our overall strategic framework. This is because of our far-sighted, visionary leadership pattern. So we should actually be very proud of this aspect. But now we are also facing the current account deficit problem. It is getting widened gradually. This is leading to the reduction of the forex reserves. Next aspect is currency devaluation. That is, our rupee is getting depreciated. It has reached to 82 rupees per dollar, which is actually an alarming signal for us. So these aspects have basically the main driving forces for us to continue our trade relationship with Russia. We are seeing their good points. We are seeing their strengths. We are seeing their good points, because of which we are continuing our trade relationship with them. We are also propagating peace. We are urging both leaders, that is Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky, to please stop the war and reach to the negotiation through dialogue peacefully and in a harmonious way. So basically, we will discuss this particular aspect in detail now. That is, how do we justify our stand to basically not support the sanctions being put by the Western countries on Russia, why we are abstaining from it. We will discuss this particular aspect in detail, and at the end of the session, all of us should try to look within and ask ourselves, are our leaders doing right thing? Correct? All of us have to look within and ask ourselves, after doing effective pestle analysis and SWOT analysis at our own level. Correct? So, Russia-Ukrainian war. Is India right in giving prominence to its strategic preferences? Russia's referenda and annexation of 4 eastern Ukrainian regions have exacerbated the situation. India is right to be deeply disturbed about the worsening Ukrainian crisis. How and when it will end is actually unclear. With the Nord Stream pipelines sabotaged, Europe's energy crisis aggravated, the European Union being intransigent, Russia's implicit nuclear warnings, US announcing additional billions of dollars of arms aid to Ukraine, and more sanctions on Russia, the outlook is very grim. Mind you, we are still seeing the impact of that Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The impact which the nuclear war has had on them, the generations and generations have been suffering. And that war happened very long back. And if we do the comparative analysis, of the development of the nuclear technology of that time and today's time, obviously God knows what will happen if this war if this war becomes nuclear in nature. Keeping in mind that Russia is the superpower, also as Ukraine is being supported by US, it is also a superpower. So if they engage in the nuclear war, it would be very dangerous and risky for the entire globe. So we should try our best to persuade them to stop the war as soon as possible, and we need to advocate peace and harmony. That's the need of the hour. That's the only need of the hour. And that's what our leaders are doing at the international forums, in the global summits, where our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, is doing his best is actually doing his best to persuade them to on this humanitarian approach, convincing them to engage in a peaceful dialogue and reach to a certain point of negotiation with a solution-oriented mindset. Should the United States begin enforcing sanctions on undeterred Russia more vigorously, pressures on non-Western countries would increase, compounding the fuel, food, and fertilizer shortages. As we had discussed the fuel aspect, we will also discuss the food and fertilizer aspect. Since this war began, we have been seeing major food shortages in various parts of the world. India had also seen that thing, but gradually India was able to sustain itself and even help other countries in supplying food, right? So because of our visionary and far-sighted strategies on which our nation is being governed. And also, India is the developing country whose major chunk of population, that is around 60% of the population, is engaged in the primary sector, and they are dependent for their survival on the primary sector. So these two main things, that is food and fertilizers, are very important for the developing countries. And specifically, if we talk about India, the disturbances in their supply would affect our economy a lot. So we need to develop our international relations very diplomatically and with great maturity. Now in this aspect, I would like to put another point that recently the International Monetary Fund has stated that that the developing nations must invest $1 trillion in green energy for the net zero target by 2050. It has done the whole analysis, which I'm going to put forward in front of you. The IMF on Friday, that is on 7th October, it had said that developing economies needed an investment of $1 trillion a year by 2030 solely in the renewable energy sector in order to stay on track to achieve the net zero greenhouse gas emissions target by 2050. Observing that emerging markets and developing economies account for nearly 2/3 of the global greenhouse gas emissions, the International Monetary Fund said these developing economies would need significant climate financing in the coming years in order to reduce their emissions and to adapt to the physical effects of the climate change. The investment needs of these economies solely in the renewable energy could reach $1 trillion a year by 2030 if they are to stay on track to achieve the net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, it said. So basically, we have to pay equal emphasis to this aspect as well, because we are a very active economy in the global scenario. We have been performing fairly well, and it's our major responsibility. If we see from climate initiative to go green, it's the need of the hour to protect our planet, right? The 17 Sustainable Development Goals put forward by the United Nations have to be given equal importance. And now this time is very sensitive because of this ongoing war. So we have to put forward our policies in a very strategic way, with a very intelligent mindset, with a vigorous SWOT analysis and pestle analysis on regular basis. And that's what we have been doing. That is, to convert those threats into opportunities, and to actually capitalize on our points of strengths. Correct? So this is the testing phase, and we have to overcome this period with flying colors, and that's what we are doing. And for that we have been receiving the praises at the international forums on regular basis. That is how we have been able to deal with the crisis, and not only sustain ourselves but also helping our neighboring countries, our member countries, at our best possible level. How we are performing from last 3 years, it's really very, very extraordinary. And I would also like to state that our leaders are not getting affected by the criticism which they are receiving within their own borders, through the public or through the opposition parties, because they know what is right and what is wrong, what is important for the nation's overall welfare. That's what they are doing. That's the only thing they are doing. And I personally feel it's a right step. And every one of us has to look within and ask whether what we are doing is right. The answer would be yes. Rest depends on your wisdom. I think it's right. And we have to preserve the overall territorial integrity and sovereignty. Dear friends, these times are very sensitive, so we have to act maturely. We have to sacrifice something. In order to attain balance in these tough times, we have to be little mature. There would be certain tough times for the short term, because the economic policies being framed in today's time, they have to be very visionary, which would lead to the disturbances in the economic figures for the short term. So we should not get disturbed by them. We should maintain peace and try to understand what's the need of the hour. Now, coming back to today's session, Russia's referenda decision and annexation of 4 eastern Ukrainian regions have clearly exacerbated the situation. The United States has inevitably raised the issue in the United Nations Security Council for diplomatic point scoring, knowing that no anti-Russian resolution can bypass Russia's veto. For India, the challenge again was to take a position that preserved the integrity of its foreign policy and at the same time reflected its national interests. With Western circles making much of the PM Modi's seeming admonition to President Putin at the SCO meeting about today not being an era of war, expectations arose that India might vote against Russia this time. These Western circles have criticized India's repeated abstentions in the United Nations on Ukraine-related resolutions. The tenacity of India-Russia ties basically exasperates them. India has been exhorted to condemn Russia, to isolate it further. However, India had to show great diplomatic resilience to vote in favor of its long term interests and not for the short term applause from any quarter. This is the basic essence of our leadership style in which we are being governed. That is, we do not have to look towards the short term, towards the short term repercussions. We have to see the long term implications for the overall nation's welfare, for the humanitarian welfare, for the survival of our economy, for attaining overall balance not only in our own economy but also the balance in the overall global economy as well, that is giving equal prevalence, that is giving equal importance towards the climate issue of sustainable development goals. Correct? And for that, Nitin Gadkari ji is working day and night to explore the non-fossil fuel energy options. India's vote against Russia would be a diplomatic trophy, bringing India little additional gains, whereas for India, it would mean a strategic choice of longer term import with enduring costs with regard to the existing structures of its foreign policy. India therefore rightly abstained again. India framed its explanation of vote, that is EOV, in a way that parts could be interpreted as implicit disapproval of Russia's action. Modi's remark that it was not an era of war was repeated, knowing how it had been interpreted in the West, and the formulation that the global order was based on the United Nations Charter, international law, and the respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states covered indirectly the issue of referenda and annexation, which India cannot obviously approve. But a balance of nuances was maintained in the EOV, that is, the explanation of vote. The call for dialogue as the only answer to settling the differences and disputes, keeping open diplomatic channels, and actually abjuring rhetoric, urging all concerned sides to make efforts for an immediate cessation of violence and hostilities was directed at all sides. The larger concern of India and the developing countries with regard to food, fuel, and fertilizer shortages was also flagged. This is a very important issue on which we have to work, and we have to formulate and implement all our strategies, keeping this point in our mind, that is food, fuel, and fertilizer, the three main sectors the developing economy should focus on for its basic survival. The EOV meaningfully mentioned that keeping in view of the totality, that is, meaning the rights and wrongs on both sides of the evolving situation, that is, no clear endgame yet, India decided to abstain. That is, we have to act very maturely, very maturely. Diplomatically, India was spared some embarrassment if only India and China had abstained. But Brazil and Gabon, representing Africa, abstaining has spared India criticism of joining the autocrats. It says a lot that India's abstention came notwithstanding EAM's extended US visit, during which he met the key policy makers and discussed Ukraine. India will no doubt abstain again when an anti-Russian resolution is now moved in the United Nations General Assembly. In a further balancing exercise then, and to also diffuse the narrative that Putin was rebuked at Samarkand, Modi has now firmly told Zelensky that there can be no military solution to the conflict, sought an ending of hostilities, advocated the pursuit of dialogue and diplomacy. Ukraine is pursuing military success and rejects negotiation. This is not so good news. This is not a good news. Besides expressing deep concern about the nuclear threats entering into the discourse. So friends, this is a very sensitive time which is going on in the global scenario, and we are living in a very turbulent global atmosphere, and hence keeping in mind that we are a developing country, it's our moral responsibility to advocate peace, to urge our friends Russia and Ukraine to please stop war. We have to and that's what we have been doing, and that's what we will do till this war stops, till this war comes to an end. We have to request them to please stop this as soon as possible. On the other hand, we being a developing country, we are our leaders are responsible for the sustenance of the nation, and that's what we have been doing, and for this we have been we are being appreciated worldwide for our extremely extraordinary strategies. So the imbalance, the short-term imbalance which is happening in the economic parameters, that will happen actually. Yes, that will happen. Practically speaking, it will happen because we need to see what's the priority as of now. Yes, we have to see what's the priority as of now. We have to look towards our forex reserves, as we had discussed in yesterday's session, that it is getting lowered. Our current account deficit is widening. Our currency is facing depreciation. That is now it has reached to 82 rupees per dollar, as we have discussed this in our sessions. So these are the main issues which we have to tackle first, right? So in the process, the short-term parameters may face a little upheaval. So in that, what's the responsibility of us citizens? We citizens need to maintain peace. We should understand what is happening and what is happening around us, and how to combat those issues, and how to fight with them with full resilience, how to act maturely with full perseverance. And yes, we have to look within and ask what is right and what is wrong. We have to do the SWOT analysis at our own level, right? And then see what we are doing, what our leaders are doing. Is that right or wrong? This is our individual responsibility. I have done my part after introspection, and I am very proud of our leaders. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.